Hi, my name is Caroline Pidcock. I'm the second member of the team that has created this resource for you. I'm an architect practicing for nearly 40 years with a focus on sustainability and regeneration. More recently, I have been focused on advocacy and advice with regards to how architecture can positively address climate change. My involvement on this project has primarily been in bringing an industry focus to the work and testing the guides and templates. So today, this module 2 is about using those guides and templates and seeing how we have developed them and how we've applied them. This module 2 is the second in the core learning modules of the masterclass and will be followed by 3 specialised modules on specific areas of government and industry, public and media, and strategic social media. In this module, we'll talk about the resources that we've developed, the writing guides and templates for policy briefs and executive summaries, and a communication insights and useful resources document which will help you writing in generally. The aim of this is to really give you the tools that you need to write a really compelling and potent policy brief or executive summary. So the structure of this module, we'll start with the aims and outcomes. We'll talk about the specific IEA, EBC writing guides and templates. We'll talk about the things you need to consider before you start writing. And then we'll talk specifically to the content of policy briefs and executive summaries and walk through each of the sections of those. And then we'll finish with some brief communication tools and tips. So the aim of this module is to take you through the templates, guides and samples that we have developed and show you how they can support you improving your connection with your key audiences. The outcome we hope to get from this is for you to clearly understand these resources and tools so that you can increase the impact of your policy briefs and executive summaries and see how the templates have been used as we worked on 3 different annexes and took their work and used them to develop some policy briefs and executive summaries. So as we mentioned at the outset, there have been a number of different documents that have been developed to help you with this. The 5 prime resource documents are a policy brief writing guide and a policy brief template, an executive writing summary guide, executive summary writing guide, and executive summary template, and then communication insights and useful resources, which is a more generalised document to help you with your writing to make sure it's much more impactful and potent. Of course, these are complementary to other documents that the IEA EBC has already developed. And here is a number of examples just to show you what these might look like. The writing guides on the left-hand side, templates in the middle, and then a couple of samples on the right-hand side. So, things to consider before you write. There's a number of different things to really go through carefully that will help you make sure that whatever you do, whether it's a policy brief or executive summary, will be as impactful and as sharp as they can be. So first of all, what is a policy? Well, a policy is a set of rules or guidelines basically that a government or an organisation develops to help create a consistent approach to a problem that will help through decisions and actions. It helps to make people know what to do in specific situations. And these sorts of policies should be based on evidence-based research, such as the work the IEA EBC delivers. And what should be really front and centre is to explain the impact and value of that research and the outcomes that you develop. So secondly, what research outcomes do you want to articulate? I think if we go back to module 1, we have to start with identifying your target audience. Who do you want to present to, and what are they interested in? So what are their relevant issues that they are really focused on at the moment? And then it is really key to understand what pressures they will be under as in where they sit in the whole ecosystem, the broader ecosystem, and who's influencing them as well, so that you can understand how to specifically shape your advice to help them manage those other influences. So what is a policy brief and what is an executive summary? We'll go through this in more detail, but in essence, they're both standalone documents covering a single topic, and they're short, 2 pages up to 1,000 words. And in just overall, the purpose of a policy brief is to tell the reader what they should do, and the purpose of an executive summary is to provide information overview or keep the reader informed. So what is a policy brief? It actually presents research and recommendations to a non-academic audience of an issue that requires action. So basically, it's taking your research and saying what actionable policy options could come from this that will help the government deal with an issue that it is interested in, their actions can then be based on evidence. A policy brief is not a summary of your research. It's an interpretation of your research that will help policymakers in the region that you're focusing on to apply your research in a very specific way. There are a number of different ways you can articulate your policy recommendations. You can provide a stick or regulation. You can provide a carrot or economic means and encouragement. Or you can provide a sermon, information or training. And these can be done in the affirmative or the negative. And again, sometimes there can be a mix within your recommendations. We'll show you how we've done this in one of our samples going forward, and there'll be much more detail on this in Module 3 on government and industry. An executive summary, on the other hand, presents the state of knowledge to a non-academic audience. It's not telling them what to do, it's saying, here's some information that has become available and is really of interest. It might be quite broad or it could be very specific. And again, this should be written as a standalone document, and it often brings to light information or findings that were previously not understood. For example, in Annex 86, it was found that the costs of air conditioning were much less impactful than the costs of not having well-conditioned spaces on the people in them. So that was sort of an important thing for policymakers generally to know about. So then you need to say, why write one? Why write a policy brief or an executive summary? And the real reason behind that is because the people who are making policies they're time poor, they're not experts, they have a lot of competing priorities, and sometimes they have out-of-date understanding. So this is a real opportunity, some might even say an obligation, for people doing research that you are to convey your material in really succinct and potent ways that are really accessible, that can be useful and actionable in how you do that. Because if they don't trust you, who is giving them information for their actions? So a policy brief or an executive summary should have a really clear and specific purpose that is supported by evidence. I think you need to start at the beginning and write down your purpose and then continually refer back to it as you develop up this document. And your purpose could be to make recommendations that will lead to policy change and impact. It can provide specific evidence on a problem or issue that you know that the policymakers are tackling. It can inform an audience of a new issue, or it can even counter misinformation that you know that they are being exposed to, that they need to understand is not correct. You can also think about, is there something new or important you want them to know? Is there a specific action you would like them to take? What do you want them to do with your findings? For policy briefs, you need to consider carefully what your policy recommendations might be. And they need to be based very specifically on your research and other data to give that advice. You need to make sure that your advice is strongly based on your evidence. And remember, your role is to persuade rather than inform. Going back to Module 1, you need to really remember that there's a very big difference between academic writing and writing for non-academic people so that they can understand. They will have different levels of understanding, they'll have different drivers and interests and passions, and different communication and learning style. So as you prepare your policy brief or executive summary, you need to really write in a language of the audience that you are aiming for so that they are going to be as receptive as possible to the information you'll be presenting. And again, we go to this stakeholder understanding from Module 1. It's really key to understand where the decision maker sits in that broader ecosystem and who is going to be pushing their buttons and giving them information so that you can help shape your information to best address those influences. While the science and numbers are the foundation to your work and give it the validity that it has, it's actually the public value of it that is of great interest to the audience that you will be writing to in these policy briefs and executive summaries, and it's really important to help them understand that. So rather than abating tons of carbon dioxide, messages such as the air will be cleaner and healthier, or that naturally comfortable buildings that are really affordable to live in, or great business opportunities that are arising from your work, they're much more exciting and interesting and will get much greater reception from your audience. So really think about what the public value of your work is and deliver that as part of your the brief and the executive summary. So now to the policy brief and executive summary. Here are two diagrams that kind of show the key overviews, and I'll go through each part of it in detail now. Where do you start and how do you start? We'll be going through the Annex 80 as an example. And we started with, well, what are we going to write about? And I looked at the table of contents from their summary for policymakers and found that that was not super clear on what was the most interesting part. So we went into the document and came back and tabulated that same table of contents into this format on the right, which indicates where they are, and then through both colour and columns indicated various areas of interest and grouped them really strongly into their different areas. So I think that the diagram on the right-hand side is much easier to comprehend than the one on the left, and is an indication of how you can, from the very beginning, present your work in much more legible and easy to understand ways. After we did that, we said, well, let's focus on cool envelope materials as a whole area for a policymaker. The first part of your policy brief or executive summary will be the title, which should be about 1 or 2 lines depending. And it should be very specific about what it is you're going to say. And ideally, it will convey the benefits of what you're about to present. So, for example, improving energy efficiency and livability through public housing links that energy efficiency with livable aspects of the housing, which is really important. Or removing barriers to centralised radiative cooling in apartment buildings shows that you can take away, that you're providing a solution and removing barriers for something that needs to happen. In an executive summary, you need to sort of show how it will influence something of public value. For example, grid integration software for fair and affordable electricity use. It's linking that the software is going to help deliver much more equitable electricity to many, which is a great and attention-catching title. So in Annex 80, we took the idea of saying codifying cool surfaces to protect people and the grid during heat waves. So it focuses on protecting both people and also the electricity grid during heat waves because of the work of Annex 80 on cool surfaces by putting that into the building code. Next is the overview, which is about 150 to 180 words, or about 25% of the document. And basically, this needs to contain everything the reader needs to know, because it might be the only thing they read. And ideally, in reading it, they'll want to keep reading. So it needs to summarise the topic and distill the essence of what you're about to go into. It's got to make really clear why it's important for the policymaker and give them an indication of what they'll gain from reading the whole document. Whilst it appears at the top and at the very beginning, it's often best to write this last after you've written the rest of the document, so that you can really bring the essence to it. You can put it in a box if you want to emphasise it's important, but it's not critical to do that. And just remember when you're writing this that you are the expert. You've got to provide unvarnished opinions with confidence. Don't sort of worry about that it's not 100% approved or confirmed. Write strong, active statements that convey your authority and the research that you are presenting. And often a simple graph or a diagram or a photo can help strengthen that idea from the front. So, back to our Annex 80 overview. First of all, we started with a reference to heat waves, which are increasingly problematic for people everywhere. And policymakers are very interested in this because they're trying to reduce that problem. The image we chose, which is a thermal image of a shopping centre, absolutely amplifies that image, particularly with those colours. Then we spoke about the whole idea of this is how resilient approaches such as cool surfaces can help address both the heat and decrease the strain on the grid. And so we chose that bar chart there, which shows the base case and then how different aspects of that can help reduce the impact. So again, both of those, that photo and that bar chart, really gives impact to that overview. Next, we move on to recommendations or key information for policymakers. And that's about 200 words, or about 35% of the document. And this section details the most important points or actions that of the research findings that need the attention of the policymaker. For a policy brief, basically you should state what policymakers should do and what outcome you expect this will lead to by taking this action, and do this in about 3 points. You should do it in sequential order from the greatest importance to the next ones. Make sure what you write is credible, feasible, and able to benefit the particular market you're targeting. And you need to make the case for change, and stating the public value of what you are proposing. For an executive summary, you need to summarise the key findings in 3 or 4 bullet points and highlight what's new in this research, what's different, what we didn't know before. And then again, put it in order of significance. You need to state it clearly and unambiguously. You don't need to explain the methodology, and you don't need to have any caveats around the certainty of results. Remember, you're the expert. And specify the implications of the research. So for Annex 80, we made a number of different recommendations, and this was aimed at the Australian building policy makers. So we picked out 4 different ones, and as you can see on the left, I've used those indicators of carrots, sticks and sermons to show that there is a mix. And the first one, which is expand cool roof policies to include cool walls, accounting for roof wall differences in materials and physics, is actually a mix of both carrot, being a regulation, and sermon, being information about it. The next one is expand existing requirements in the National Construction Code. Well, that's a stick because that's all regulation. Offer rebates for manufacturers or homeowners to offset initial CoolSurf product premiums is a carrot because that's giving some incentives for people to do what you are recommending. And then finally, create a training and certificate program for the contractors to understand and install this better. That's a sermon because that's helping set up the whole thing for success by giving information to people who need it in a way that will be really helpful. We next move on to the background and context, which is about 200 or 300 words or 40% of the document. And this is where you can give good, strong background information to put your recommendations into context and into the context of the policymaker's work and responsibility. So here you need to say, why do they need to read this now? What is the main challenge or opportunity that you are presenting to them? Are there any risks and mitigation opportunities? And what is the risk of not doing anything? You can talk a little bit about the research process and then what the next steps might be. For a policy brief, you need to highlight key information that supports your recommendation and what is specifically of value to the public, because that is the whole purpose of policy, really. Cost benefits or other key outputs that supports the key recommended change and what the implications for policy. For the executive summary, you need to list the main findings using one sentence per finding. You can include key figures or a range of those figures when trying to quantify those findings and summarising results. So in Annex 80, the background and context, we included information that brings to life more of the research from the annex. And we tried to illustrate why such action should be taken and the benefits that result. We included an image of a building that has got cool surfaces included and it looks beautiful, and an image of a building that doesn't and has lots of air conditioning units, which looks pretty terrible. So this is trying to also give strength to the whole proposal of why this action needs to be taken. Further reading can provide further information about stuff, about your annex and the work that you've done and other reports and fact sheets. But you need to be brief and you need to be relevant. You don't need to provide an exhaustive list. It might give the reader the impression that there's so much more work to do and it's so much more complex than it is. So for Annex 80, we gave a reference to the publications that came out of that annex, which is a good way of giving them access to the information they might want without overwhelming it. And we referred specifically to the policy recommendations document because that's of direct relevance to the policymaker. Then about the authors. This is where you need to state your name, position, institution, contact details, and the name of the annex you're involved with. It gives the whole document credibility. And you can include other acknowledgements if you need, but also make sure you include a paragraph about the IEA EBC program, because this also will give great credibility to the document when other people get hold of it. So for Annex 80, we included the name, Annex 80, Resilient Cooling of Buildings. We made reference to Dr. Peter Holzer, the operating agent, his position, institution and contact details, and we included details about the IEA EBC, which is important for the readers of this document. So, communication tools and tips. How to make this more impactful. Some general tips. Microsoft Word has some very good language tools which you can easily make use of and can help make your document much better, both spell checks and also in checking the grammar. It's a really good idea to read your brief aloud because often things sound very different when you read them as to when you say them. You can try and test your writing with non-annex or non-academic people, perhaps family or friends, and see if they can understand what you're saying, because you need to make it clear to people who aren't academics, and that's the whole a really strong focus of this work. Make sure you use culturally sensitive language. And you can use AI tools to test out different voices. You could ask AI to say, how could you change this? How could you address this, what you've written, in a way that a 15-year-old will understand, or a teacher would understand, or someone else? And whilst you might not use it exactly, it might give you some good tips in helping you shape and really focus on your outcome. Visuals are a great way to replace words and make impact. And they are cross-cultural, and they, I think the idea that a picture speaks 1,000 words is really relevant. The bar graphs are often preferable to data tables. This is the data table from Annex 80, and then that's the bar chart that we created from that, picking out the information that was of greatest relevance and putting it into a format that is visually really impactful very quickly. Make sure you put captions that explain them, and also use high quality images, particularly photographs, because if the document gets printed, you need that high quality. What do you do if you're asked to present your work? There's a whole bunch of ideas, but basically do keep text to a minimum. It's a very good idea to make sure that there's the least amount of words possible. Make sure you use a text that is readable. 24 points or larger is advisable. Do make sure there's a high contrast between the text or the background so that the text is easily legible. The graphics and visuals you use should be only selected to illustrate the concepts, not something else. And make sure you speak with enthusiasm and passion. Too many colours can make things very difficult to read. So make sure that you select colours that are appropriate, not too many, and use them to help emphasise your information and provide contrast and background to your font. Don't use too many images. Just choose ones that are really powerful and can help reinforce what you're saying and not distract from what you're saying. Images as background can be very distracting and can make the text difficult to read and can look really messy. So be really careful about using images and perhaps using a solid colour background behind the text. Too many fonts and too many illegible fonts don't help you. So choose ones that are really easy to read at long distances and not too many. Common mistakes that people make when presenting is avoiding eye contact, speaking incoherently, using too many colours, too much text that is too small, and using the images as background. So remember that you're trying to present information in a way that people can easily absorb it. So make it as easy as possible for them. Next will be a deep dive into modules that will give you support with specific and further information from the annexes. Module 3 will focus on government and industry. Module 4 will focus on the public and the media. And Module 5 will show you how you can use social media really strategically to both build your profile that will help increase the influence of your research. So, thank you very much for listening to this part of the masterclass. I wish you all the best and hope that these resources can help you bring your research to life and make even greater impact. Thanks a lot. Bye.